Have you ever wondered who the first airline in the world was? Most people think of Boeing, Pan Am, or even the Wright brothers when they imagine the origins of air travel. But what if I told you the world's first airline wasn't about airplanes at all? Instead of roaring jet engines, imagine silent, floating giants drifting through the sky, offering a luxurious and scenic experience unlike anything today. These weren't planes. They were Zeppelins. And in 1909, long before commercial airplanes ruled the skies, a German company called Deutsche Luftschiffahrts-Aktiengesellschaft, or DELAG, became the first airline in history. Not an experimental project, not a single lucky flight. DELAG operated thousands of flights, carried tens of thousands of passengers, and changed air travel forever. But how did this all begin? And why did airships, once the future of travel, suddenly vanish? Let's go back to the beginning. The story of DELAG starts with one man, Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin. A former German military officer, Zeppelin was fascinated with the idea of air travel. In the late 1800s, while the Wright brothers were still perfecting their early airplanes, Zeppelin had a different vision. Massive, rigid airships that could carry people comfortably over long distances. At the time, balloon travel had existed for over a century, but balloons had no direction. They drifted wherever the wind took them. Zeppelin wanted controlled flight. He imagined a world where massive airships, powered by engines and guided by rudders, could move independently through the sky like modern aircraft. But there was just one problem. No one believed in his idea. When Zeppelin first proposed his massive airships, he was laughed at. The German military rejected his early designs. Investors weren't interested, and even his test flights failed. His first prototype, LZ-1, took off in 1900, but was a disaster. The flight lasted only 18 minutes before the airship crashed into a lake. Most inventors would have given up. Zeppelin didn't. He kept building, refining, and improving his designs. Over the next few years, his airships became more stable, more reliable, and much larger. Eventually, the German public started to take notice. Zeppelin became a national hero, and his airships were seen as a symbol of German engineering and progress. By 1908, he had perfected his designs, and his airships could now travel hundreds of kilometers, carrying multiple passengers in a fully controlled flight. The time had come to turn this into a business. In November 1909, the world's first airline was born, DELAG. Unlike experimental flights or military test runs, DELAG was a real airline, offering regularly scheduled flights to paying passengers. It was the first time in history that civilians could buy a ticket to fly, not just as a novelty, but as an actual mode of transportation. And these weren't just short, pointless trips. DELAG's Zeppelins could carry over 20 passengers at a time and travel between cities across Germany. The experience was unlike anything else, an elegant, smooth, and silent journey through the skies. Imagine stepping into a lavishly decorated cabin, complete with plush seats, panoramic windows, and even dining services. Unlike the cramped airplanes of today, DELAG's airships were floating luxury hotels, and people loved it. Between 1910 and 1914, DELAG completed more than 1,600 flights, carrying over 34,000 passengers, all without a single fatal accident. For the wealthy elite of the early 1900s, airship travel was the ultimate luxury experience. DELAG's first airship, LZ-7 Deutschland, took off in 1910, but it was quickly replaced by more advanced models like the LZ-10 Schwaben. These airships primarily flew between major German cities, but plans were in place to expand beyond Germany. The goal? To make Zeppelin travel the future of global transportation. However, that dream wouldn't last long. Just as DELAG was beginning to take off, World War I changed everything. The German military took control of all Zeppelins, repurposing them for war. Instead of carrying passengers, these massive airships were now used for bombing missions and reconnaissance. But the war also exposed their weaknesses. While Zeppelins were large and intimidating, they were also slow and vulnerable. Allied forces quickly figured out how to shoot them down, and by the end of the war, airships were no longer seen as reliable military assets. After the war, Germany was forbidden from building new airships under the Treaty of Versailles. DELAG was effectively shut down, and the golden age of Zeppelin passenger travel was over. In the 1920s and 30s, airships made a brief comeback under a new company, the Zeppelin Corporation. The famous Graf Zeppelin and Hindenburg airships once again carried passengers across the Atlantic. At its peak, Zeppelin travel was faster and more comfortable than ocean liners. In fact, the LZ-129 Hindenburg could cross the Atlantic in just 2.5 days, while a ship took 5 days. But this era came to a tragic end in 1937, when the Hindenburg disaster shocked the world. The massive airship burst into flames while attempting to land in New Jersey. The explosion, caught on film, was one of the most devastating moments in aviation history. It destroyed public trust in airships, and from that moment on, passenger Zeppelin travel was effectively dead. But while Zeppelins faded into history, DELAG's impact was undeniable. It proved that commercial air travel was possible. It showed that people were willing to pay for flights, opening the door for modern airlines to follow. And today, every time you step onto a plane, you're continuing the journey that started in 1909 with DELAG, the world's first airline. So, next time you're flying across the world, just remember, before airplanes, before airports, before budget airlines, there was DELAG. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.